The arrival of the instructors. The lecture hall was enormous, built to accommodate the many varied species of the Galactic Consortium. Hovering platforms allowed beings of all sizes to navigate the tiers of seats, with an array of environmental controls to cater to different atmospheric and gravitational preferences. It was a marvel of engineering, designed to foster the sharing of knowledge across the galaxy's most intelligent and advanced civilizations. Yet, despite all its grandeur, the room was filled with an unusual tension today. At the center of the hall stood a group of beings who commanded attention, not through their size or technological prowess, but through a kind of latent, unsettling power. These were the humans, the so-called Deathworlders, representatives from the infamous planet Earth. They were here to teach, though their presence alone seemed to unsettle the crowd. Many of the students had only heard rumors of these beings, stories of their violent history, their unpredictable nature, and their seemingly endless capacity for survival against all odds. Instructor Valara, a Xerixian, clicked her mandibles nervously as she observed the humans. Her species was known for their analytical minds, and she had studied Earth and its inhabitants in great detail. But nothing in her studies had prepared her for the presence of these beings. There was a quiet intensity to them, a sense that they were always calculating, always ready for danger, even in the heart of the consortium's most secure facility. The leader of the human delegation, a man named Captain James Thorne, stepped forward. He was tall by human standards, with a muscular build and an air of calm confidence. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the various species before him. With a slight nod, he began to speak. "Good day, esteemed members of the Galactic Consortium," Thorne said, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "My team and I are here to provide instruction on a subject that is both familiar and foreign to many of you: combat, specifically the weapons and tactics developed on Earth. While some of you may consider this knowledge unnecessary or even barbaric, I assure you that understanding these principles could be crucial to your survival." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. The consortium was a society built on peace and cooperation, where war was considered an outdated concept. The idea of learning about weapons, particularly those from a death world, was unsettling. Thorne continued, unfazed by the murmurs. "Let me be clear, we are not here to promote violence. However, the galaxy is vast and unpredictable. There are forces out there that do not share the consortium's ideals. You must be prepared to defend yourselves and those you care about. That is why we are here." With a gesture, Thorne summoned a holographic display that flickered to life above him. It showed various images of Earth, its diverse landscapes, from lush forests to arid deserts, and its countless species, both peaceful and predatory. The display then shifted to scenes of human conflict, from ancient battles fought with swords and shields to modern warfare with firearms and explosives. Valara watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. The sheer variety of weapons and tactics was astounding, each one tailored to the specific environment and circumstances of the conflict. It was clear that humans had a deep understanding of war, honed over millennia of survival on a world that seemed intent on challenging them at every turn. "As you can see," Thorne said, "Earth is a world of extremes. Our planet has forced us to adapt, to innovate, and to overcome challenges that many of you would find unimaginable. This has led to the development of weapons and strategies that are as diverse as they are effective. Today, we will begin with the basics." The first lesson was on projectile weapons, a concept that seemed almost archaic to many of the students. The consortium had long since moved beyond such crude means of combat, relying instead on energy-based technology that was cleaner and more efficient. But as Thorne demonstrated, there was a simplicity and reliability to projectile weapons that made them valuable in certain situations. He held up a device known as a rifle, explaining its mechanics in detail. The students watched as he disassembled and reassembled the weapon with practiced ease, showing them the precision and care that went into its design. The weapon was straightforward, effective, and most importantly, adaptable to a wide range of environments. One of the students, a Krakak named Jirak, raised a limb. Instructor Thorn, why do your species still use such primitive weapons? Surely energy weapons are more advanced and efficient. Thorn smiled slightly. Energy weapons are indeed powerful, but they have their limitations. They require energy sources that can be depleted or disrupted. They can also be affected by environmental factors like humidity or electromagnetic interference. Projectile weapons, on the other hand, rely on physical force, something that is much harder to counter. In certain situations, they can be the difference between life and death. Jurek seemed to consider this, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. The other students remained quiet, absorbing the information with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. As the lesson progressed, Thorn and his team introduced more advanced concepts, such as tactics for urban combat and the use of explosives. Each demonstration was met with a mix of awe and discomfort. The humans were teaching them how to fight, how to kill, skills that many in the consortium had never considered necessary. By the end of the session, Valara felt a strange sense of unease. The humans were undeniably skilled, and their knowledge was invaluable. But there was something unsettling about their methods, something that spoke of a dark past filled with violence and conflict. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something dangerous, something that could change the consortium forever. As the students filed out of the hall, murmuring among themselves, Valara stayed behind. She approached Captain Thorn, who was discussing the next lesson with his team. "Captain Thorn," she said, her voice carefully measured, "may I speak with you privately?" Thorn looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Of course, Instructor Valara. What's on your mind?" Valara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I studied your species extensively, and I understand why you're here. But I must ask, what is it that you truly hope to achieve by teaching us these skills? Is it merely preparation, or is there something more?" Thorn regarded her for a moment, his gaze steady. "Our goal is to prepare you for the realities of the galaxy, Instructor Valara. The consortium's ideals are noble, but there are forces out there that do not share your vision of peace. We want to ensure that when the time comes, you have the means to protect what you hold dear." Valara nodded slowly, though her unease remained. "And what if those means lead to conflict? What if the knowledge you provide us leads to war?" Thorn's expression softened, and for a moment, Valara thought she saw a flicker of sadness in his eyes. "War is a terrible thing, Instructor. But sometimes it is necessary to preserve peace. We hope that by sharing our knowledge, we can help you avoid the mistakes of our past. But ultimately, the choice will be yours." With that, Thorn turned and walked away, leaving Valara alone with her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had just begun, something that would change the course of the consortium's future. The hands-on experience. The following day, the students were led to a large outdoor training ground adjacent to the lecture hall. The area was equipped with various obstacles, simulated urban environments, and holographic targets that could be programmed to mimic different species and combat scenarios. It was a far cry from the sterile, controlled environments most of the students were used to, and it immediately put many of them on edge. Captain Thorn and his team were already there, waiting for the students to arrive. The humans had changed out of their formal attire and were now dressed in tactical gear, each carrying a variety of weapons and equipment. They looked every bit the part of seasoned warriors, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. "Welcome to the hands-on portion of your training," Thorn said as the students gathered around him. "Today, you'll be applying the concepts we discussed yesterday in a series of practical exercises. You'll have the opportunity to handle real weapons, navigate challenging environments, and engage in simulated combat scenarios. Remember, this is a learning experience. Mistakes will happen, and that's okay. The important thing is to learn from them." The students exchanged nervous glances. Many of them had never handled a weapon before, let alone engaged in combat training. Valara noticed that even Jurak, who had been vocal in the previous session, seemed apprehensive. This was a new experience for all of them, and the stakes felt higher than ever. Thorn motioned to a nearby table, where a selection of weapons had been laid out. There were rifles, pistols, and even more primitive tools like knives and clubs. Each weapon was meticulously maintained, a testament to the humans' respect for their craft. "Let's start with something simple," Thorn said, picking up a rifle and holding it out to the students. "This is an Earth-standard projectile weapon. You'll be using these in today's exercises. Take a moment to familiarize yourselves with the controls and wait." The students approached the table hesitantly, each selecting a weapon. Valara picked up a rifle, surprised by how heavy it was. The weapon felt alien in her hands, its cold metal surface a stark contrast to the organic technology she was used to. She studied the controls, noting the trigger, safety, and magazine release. It was a simple design, yet there was an underlying complexity that spoke of centuries of refinement. Thorn observed as the students cautiously examined the weapons. He could sense their discomfort, but made no effort to ease it. This was part of the lesson. Understanding the weight of a weapon, both physically and metaphorically, was crucial to understanding the seriousness of combat. "Now," Thorn began, "before we proceed to the live exercises, I want you to understand something very important. These weapons are tools, but they are also dangerous. They can save lives, but they can also take them. The power to wield them must be tempered with responsibility and respect. Do not forget that." With that somber reminder, Thorn led the students to the first exercise station, a simulated urban environment. The holographic cityscape was designed to mimic the chaotic, unpredictable nature of urban warfare, with narrow alleys, tight corners, and multiple levels of elevation. The environment shifted subtly, keeping the participants on edge as they navigated the maze-like streets. "Your task is simple," Thorn explained. "You will move through this environment, identify the holographic targets, and engage them. Some targets will be hostile, others will be neutral. Your goal is to neutralize the threats while avoiding harm to innocents. We will be observing your actions and providing feedback." Valara felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her abdomen. This was far outside her comfort zone. She was a scholar, not a soldier. But as she looked around at the other students, she saw similar expressions of uncertainty and determination. They were all in this together, facing the unknown with nothing but their wits and what little they had learned. The simulation began with a sudden burst of noise. Sirens blared, and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the simulated city. Valara clutched her rifle tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She moved cautiously through the narrow streets, her senses on high alert. The first holographic target appeared suddenly, a humanoid figure that raised a weapon in her direction. Valara's instincts took over, and she fired a shot. The rifle recoiled in her hands, the sound of the gunfire ringing in her ears. The target flickered and disappeared, indicating a successful hit. But there was no time to celebrate. Another figure emerged from a nearby alley, this one unarmed and holding up its hands in a gesture of surrender. Valara hesitated, unsure of what to do. She knew she was supposed to avoid harming non-combatants, but the line between friend and foe was not always clear in the chaos of combat. Before she could make a decision, a third target appeared on a nearby rooftop, aiming a weapon at her. Valara reacted instinctively, firing another shot. The target disappeared, but in her haste, she had also inadvertently grazed the unarmed figure. The simulation paused, and Thorn's voice came over the comms. "Valara, that was a close call. Remember, you must be aware of your surroundings at all times. In real combat, a mistake like that could have serious consequences. Good job neutralizing the threat, but be more cautious with your aim." Valara nodded, a sense of shame washing over her. She had been so focused on the immediate threat that she had lost sight of the bigger picture. It was a humbling reminder of just how difficult and complex combat could be. The exercise continued, with the students encountering various scenarios designed to test their reflexes, decision-making, and ability to adapt to changing situations. Some handled the challenges better than others, but all were pushed to their limits. By the end of the session, most of the students were exhausted, both physically and mentally. As they gathered back at the starting point, Thorn addressed the group. "You all did well today, considering this was your first experience with combat training. But remember, this was just a simulation. In the real world, the stakes are much higher. The choices you make can have life or death consequences, not just for you, but for those around you." Jirak, who had been silent throughout the exercise, finally spoke up. "Captain Thorn, I understand the importance of what you're teaching us. But I must ask, why do you humans focus so much on combat? Why do you spend so much time and energy perfecting these skills?" Thorn looked at Jirak thoughtfully before answering. "That's a good question, Jirak. The truth is, humans didn't choose to focus on combat. We were forced to. Earth is a harsh world, and from the very beginning, our survival depended on our ability to defend ourselves against predators, against the environment, and eventually against each other. Over time, we developed a deep understanding of conflict and war. It became a part of who we are, for better or worse." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But that doesn't mean we relish it. Most of us long for peace, for a world where we don't have to fight. But we also know that as long as there are threats out there, we need to be prepared. That's why we're here, to help you prepare for the unexpected, to give you the tools you need to protect your world, just as we've had to protect ours." Valara listened intently, feeling a mixture of empathy and unease. She could see the logic in Thorn's words, but it was hard to reconcile with the consortium's ideals of peace and cooperation. Was it possible to hold onto those ideals, while also embracing the harsh realities of combat? It was a question that she and her fellow students would have to grapple with as they continued their training. For now, they had taken their first steps into a new and uncertain world. A world where knowledge was not just a tool, but a weapon. And as they looked ahead to the challenges that lay before them, they knew that their understanding of war, of conflict, and of humanity itself would never be the same. The test of will. As the days turned into weeks, the training intensified. The initial exercises that had left the students exhausted were now mere warm-ups. The humans pushed them harder each day, introducing them to new weapons, tactics, and scenarios. What had once been an academic curiosity was now a relentless pursuit of mastery, and the students felt the pressure mounting. Valara had grown more confident in her abilities, but with that confidence came a growing sense of unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that this training was more than just preparation. It was a test of their will, their resolve, and their ability to embrace a side of themselves that they had long denied. One morning, the students were summoned to a remote part of the training grounds, a barren, desolate area that seemed far removed from the carefully controlled environments they had grown accustomed to. The ground was uneven, the air thick with the scent of sulfur, and the sky above was a dull, oppressive gray. It was a place designed to strip away comfort and security, leaving only the raw essence of survival. Captain Thorn and his team were waiting for them, their expressions serious. There was no trace of the camaraderie that had developed over the past few weeks. Today, there would be no hand-holding, no gentle corrections. Today was about something far more primal. "Welcome to the final phase of your training," Thorn announced, his voice carrying over the harsh landscape. "Today, you will face a challenge unlike any you've encountered before. This is not a simulation. The weapons you carry are real, and the stakes are as high as they get. You will be divided into teams and tasked with a mission that will test every skill you've learned. This is your chance to prove that you have what it takes to survive, both as individuals and as a team." The students exchanged uneasy glances. The gravity of Thorn's words was not lost on them. This was no longer just an exercise in theory or technique. This was real. Valara found herself on a team with Jurak and two other students, a Slakan named Vix and a Relosian named Keth. They had trained together before and had developed a good rapport, but this was different. The knowledge that their actions would have real consequences weighed heavily on all of them. Thorn handed them a datapad with their mission briefing. It was a simple yet daunting task. Infiltrate an enemy encampment, retrieve a valuable data core, and exfiltrate without being detected. The area was populated with hostile forces, both holographic and, as Thorn had ominously hinted, potentially real. As they reviewed the mission parameters, Valara couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. This was more than just a test of skill, it was a test of character. The choices they made here would define them, perhaps for the rest of their lives. The mission began under the cover of darkness. The team moved silently through the rugged terrain, their senses heightened by the ever-present danger. Valara took point, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. She had grown accustomed to the weight of the rifle in her hands, but tonight it felt heavier than ever. They reached the outskirts of the enemy camp without incident, but the real challenge was just beginning. The camp was heavily guarded, with sentries patrolling the perimeter and automated turrets scanning the area. The team would need to be precise and coordinated to avoid detection. Jurek, who had proven to be an adept strategist, suggested a plan. They would split into two pairs. Jurek and Vix would create a diversion on the far side of the camp, while Valara and Keth would infiltrate the command tent and retrieve the data core. It was a risky plan, but it was their best chance of success. Valara and Keth moved swiftly and silently, their footsteps barely making a sound on the rocky ground. They reached the command tent just as the diversion began. Explosions rocked the camp, and the sounds of shouting and gunfire filled the air. The guards rushed towards the commotion, leaving the tent unguarded. Valara slipped inside, her heart pounding. The data core was located in the center of the room, protected by a force field. Keth began working on disabling the field, his fingers moving with practiced precision over the control panel. Valara kept watch, her rifle at the ready. The seconds felt like hours as they waited for the field to drop. Finally, with a soft hum, the force field deactivated. Keth grabbed the data core, and they prepared to leave. But just as they turned to exit, the tent flap was thrown open, and a figure stepped inside, a human, clad in black armor, his face obscured by a helmet. Valara's breath caught in her throat. This was not part of the simulation. Valara froze, her mind racing as she tried to process what was happening. The human soldier standing before her was not a hologram, not a simulation. This was real. She could feel the tension in the air, the raw energy of a life and death situation. Her instincts screamed at her to react, to do something, but fear held her in place. Keth, sensing the danger, slowly raised his weapon. The soldier's visor locked onto him, and in a split second, the tension exploded into violence. The soldier moved with lightning speed, disarming Keth with a swift, practiced motion and knocking him to the ground. Valara watched in horror as her teammate lay motionless, stunned by the brutal efficiency of the attack. The soldier turned his attention to Valara, and she felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. Her grip tightened on her rifle, but she knew she was outmatched. This was a trained warrior, honed by years of experience, while she was still a student, barely able to control her fear. But then something shifted within her. The words of Captain Thorn echoed in her mind. The power to wield a weapon must be tempered with responsibility and respect. She realized in that moment that this was the ultimate test, not just of her skills, but of her resolve. She couldn't back down now, not when everything was on the line. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, Valara raised her rifle and aimed at the soldier. Her hands trembled, but she steadied them, focusing on her target. The soldier tilted his head, as if assessing her, before taking a slow step forward. Time seemed to stretch as Valara faced the most critical decision of her life. She knew she couldn't hesitate, but she also knew she had to be sure of her actions. This wasn't just about survival. It was about staying true to her principles. The soldier paused, his hand hovering over his weapon. Valara could see the subtle shift in his stance, the readiness to strike. She knew she had only a split second to make her move. Just as she was about to pull the trigger, a flash of movement caught her eye. Jurak and Vix burst into the tent, their weapons trained on the soldier. The sudden shift in numbers caused the soldier to hesitate, and in that moment, Valara acted. Instead of firing her weapon, she made a calculated decision to lower it. A gesture of restraint and trust. It was a gamble. A signal that she was not here to take life needlessly, even in the face of danger. For a heartbeat, the world hung in balance, the outcome uncertain. The soldier's posture relaxed slightly, and Valara felt a wave of relief wash over her. The tension in the room dissipated as the soldier slowly backed away, his weapon still at the ready, but no longer aimed at them. He seemed to recognize that this was not a situation that required bloodshed. "You passed the test," the soldier's voice crackled through the helmet's comms. The harshness of the words was softened by a hint of approval. "You showed restraint when it mattered most. That's what we were looking for." Valara's breath caught in her throat. This had all been a test, a final trial to see if they could uphold their principles under pressure. She looked at Keth, who was regaining consciousness, and then at Jurak and Vix, who were equally stunned by the revelation. Captain Thorn entered the tent, his expression unreadable. "Well done," he said, his voice carrying a tone of genuine respect. "You've all demonstrated that you understand the true nature of these weapons and the responsibility that comes with wielding them." This wasn't just about combat skills. It was about making the right decisions under extreme conditions. Valara felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and a lingering unease. She had been prepared to take a life if necessary, but in the end, she had chosen a different path. It was a choice that aligned with her values, and yet, it had taken everything she had to make it. Thorn gestured for them to follow him outside the tent. As they stepped into the open air, they saw that the entire training area had been dismantled. The holographic cityscape was gone, replaced by the barren terrain they had first encountered. It was as if the entire exercise had been a mirage, a fleeting test of their resolve. "You've completed your training," Thorn announced to the group. "You're now ready to take what you've learned and apply it in the real world. But remember, this is just the beginning. The lessons you've learned here will serve you well, but the challenges you'll face out there will be far more complex. Stay true to your principles, and never forget the weight of the weapon you carry." Valara looked at her teammates, each of them processing the gravity of what they had just experienced. They had come into this training as students, but they were leaving as something more, as individuals who had been tested and had emerged stronger for it. As they walked back to the main base, Valara felt a sense of camaraderie with her fellow students. They had faced their fears, overcome their doubts, and had grown in ways they couldn't have imagined. The training had been grueling, but it had also been transformative. And yet, there was a part of her that couldn't shake the realization that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, and the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time, Valara felt ready to face them, not just with the weapons she had learned to wield, but with the strength of character she had discovered within herself. The mission. The training may have ended, but the real test was yet to come. Valara, Jurak, Keth, and Vix were now fully integrated into the Consortium's defense forces, assigned to a newly formed Special Operations Unit that combined members of various species trained in human combat techniques. The unit was a testament to the Consortium's belief in unity and cooperation, even in the face of war. Their first mission came sooner than expected. A remote colony on the outskirts of Consortium space had gone dark, and initial intelligence suggested that it had fallen to an unknown enemy force. The mission was clear: infiltrate the colony, assess the situation, and, if necessary, neutralize the threat. As their ship approached the planet, Valara felt a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. This time, however, it was tempered with a sense of purpose. She had been trained for this, had faced down her fears, and now she was ready to put all of it to the test. The planet, Arena, was a lush forested world with dense vegetation and rolling hills. From orbit, it appeared peaceful, but the dark patches of burned-out forests and the eerie lack of communication painted a different picture. Something had happened here, something that had silenced an entire colony. As the team descended in their dropship, Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the comms. "You're going in blind, so stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with, but if the colony's gone dark, it's not good. Remember your training, work together, and stay alive." The dropship touched down in a clearing near the colony's outskirts. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind. The team disembarked, their weapons at the ready, scanning the area for any sign of movement. Valara took point, leading the team through the dense underbrush towards the colony. The air was thick with humidity, making every step feel labored. As they neared the colony's perimeter, they saw the first signs of conflict: collapsed buildings, scorched earth, and the charred remains of machinery. But there were no bodies, no signs of the colonists who had once lived here. Jurak activated his scanner, sweeping the area for life signs. "I'm picking up faint readings," he reported. "It's coming from the central compound. It could be survivors." The team moved cautiously towards the compound, their sensors on high alert. The closer they got, the more the tension built. This was the moment they had trained for, the culmination of all the lessons they had learned. But nothing could fully prepare them for what they were about to encounter. As they entered the compound, the first thing they noticed was the eerie stillness. The structures were intact, but there were no signs of life, no movement, no sound. It was as if the entire colony had been frozen in time. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Valara saw a flicker of movement. She turned, her weapon ready, and saw a figure emerge from the shadows, a colonist, or what was left of one. The man's skin was pale, his eyes vacant, and he moved with a slow, unnatural gait. It was clear that something had taken hold of him, something that had stripped away his humanity. Keth stepped forward, his voice gentle. "Sir, we're here to help. Can you tell us what happened?" The man didn't respond. Instead, he continued to shuffle forward, his eyes fixed on something far beyond the team. As he approached, Valara noticed a strange, metallic device attached to the back of his neck, pulsating with an ominous red light. Before anyone could react, the man lunged at Keth with surprising speed. Valara fired instinctively, the shot hitting the man in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, the device on his neck sparking and emitting a high-pitched whine before going silent. The team stood in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't a simple enemy attack. This was something far more insidious. Jurak crouched down, examining the device. "This isn't Consortium tech," he said, his voice filled with concern. "It's some kind of neural implant, but I've never seen anything like it." Vix, who had been scanning the surrounding area, suddenly stiffened. "We've got more incoming," she warned, her voice tense. "Lots more." Valara's heart raced as she saw them. Dozens of colonists, all moving in the same slow, shambling manner, all with the same device implanted in their necks. There was no way they could take them all down without sustaining casualties. Captain Thorne's voice came over the comms, urgent and commanding. "Fall back to the dropship. We need to regroup and assess the situation. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary." The team began to retreat, but the colonists were closing in fast. Valara fired off a few more shots, aiming to disable rather than kill. but it was clear they were outnumbered. They needed to get out of there, and fast. As they reached the dropship, Valara turned to cover the others, her rifle trained on the advancing colonists. The ship's engines rode to life, and the team scrambled aboard just as the first of the colonists reached the clearing. The ramp closed, sealing them inside, and the dropship lifted off, leaving the compound, and the nightmare it contained, behind. Valara sank into her seat, her heart pounding. They had barely made it out alive, and the full scope of what they were facing was still unclear. This mission had turned into something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Captain Thorne's voice broke the tense silence. "We need to figure out what we're dealing with, and fast. Whatever it is, it's spreading, and we're the only ones who can stop it." Valara exchanged a grim look with her teammates. The stakes had never been higher, and the next steps they took would determine the fate of not just the colony, but potentially the entire consortium. The final stand. The dropship sped towards the orbiting command ship, the weight of their discovery pressing down on the team. Valara couldn't shake the image of the colonists, their bodies hijacked by the sinister implants, their will stripped away. The mission had taken a dark turn, and now they faced an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. As the dropship docked, Captain Thorne was waiting for them, his expression grim. "We've analyzed the data you collected," he began, leading them to the briefing room. "It's worse than we thought. These implants are of alien origin, designed to control and manipulate their hosts. Whoever, or whatever, created them intends to spread this infection far and wide." The holographic display in the center of the room flickered to life, showing a map of the region. Red markers indicated the locations of known colonies and outposts, and one by one, they began to flash ominously. "The infection is spreading rapidly," Thorne continued. "We've already lost contact with 3 more colonies in the sector. If we don't act quickly, it could be the end of the consortium as we know it." Valara felt a chill run down her spine. The situation was dire, and the fate of millions hung in the balance. The team had trained for combat, but this was something far more insidious, a war for the very minds of their people. "We've identified the source of the signal controlling the implants," Thorne said, zooming in on a remote, uncharted planet on the edge of the galaxy. "It's coming from here. We believe this is the origin point of the infection, and if we can destroy the source, we can stop the spread." The room fell silent as the gravity of the mission set in. This was it, their final stand. They would be going deep into enemy territory, facing an unknown and highly dangerous threat. But there was no other choice. "I won't lie to you," Thorne said, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "This will be the most dangerous mission you've ever undertaken. But you're the best we have, and I believe in each and every one of you. The consortium is counting on us. We can't fail." Valara felt a surge of determination. This was what they had trained for, what they had been preparing for all this time. She looked at her teammates, Jarak, Keth, and Vix, seeing the same resolve in their eyes. They were ready. The team spent the next few hours preparing for the mission, checking their gear, reviewing the plan, and mentally steeling themselves for the battle ahead. Valara could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of what was to come. But there was also a sense of unity, a bond forged in the fires of their training and solidified by the challenges they had faced together. As they boarded the dropship once more, heading towards the unknown, Valara couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. They had started as students, eager but inexperienced, and now they were soldiers, ready to lay down their lives to protect the galaxy. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had shaped them into something more, into a force to be reckoned with. The dropship descended towards the planet's surface, the atmosphere crackling with energy as they neared their target. The landscape below was barren and desolate, a stark contrast to the lush world of Arena. This was a place devoid of life, a fitting origin for the horrors they had encountered. The ship touched down, and the team disembarked, their weapons at the ready. The air was thick with tension as they moved towards the source of the signal, a massive structure that loomed on the horizon. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. A towering alien monolith, pulsing with a dark, malevolent energy. As they approached, Valara could feel the weight of the place pressing down on her, a sense of dread that seemed to seep into her very bones. This was the heart of the infection, the source of the implants that had turned innocent colonists into mindless drones. "We need to move quickly," Thorn's voice came over the comms. "The longer we stay here, the greater the risk of being detected. Plant the charges and get out." The team split up, moving with precision and speed. Valara and Kath headed towards the base of the monolith, while Jurek and Vix took the higher ground, covering them from above. The air crackled with energy as they neared the structure, the oppressive atmosphere growing thicker with each step. Valara's heart pounded in her chest as she set the charges, her hands steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of her mind. This was it, the final act in a battle that had begun long before they had ever set foot on arena. If they succeeded, they would save countless lives. If they failed, the consequences would be unimaginable. The charges were set, the timers ticking down with an ominous finality. Valara signaled to the others, and they began to retreat, moving quickly but carefully, every sense on high alert. But just as they were nearing the dropship, the ground shook with a violent tremor. Valara turned, her eyes widening in horror as she saw the monolith begin to crack and shatter, dark energy spilling out in all directions. The air was filled with a high-pitched screech, a sound that seemed to bore into her skull, sending waves of pain through her mind. "Run!" Thorn's voice rang out over the comms, filled with urgency. "Get out of there now!" The team sprinted towards the dropship, the ground crumbling beneath their feet as the monolith collapsed in on itself. The air was thick with dust and debris, and Valara could barely see as she stumbled forward, her only thought to get to safety. But the force of the explosion was too great. A shockwave of energy tore through the air, knocking Valara off her feet and sending her crashing to the ground. For a moment, everything went black. When she opened her eyes, the world was a blur of pain and chaos. She could hear the distant sound of voices, muffled and indistinct, and the acrid smell of burning filled her lungs. Every part of her body ached, but she forced herself to move, to crawl towards the sound of the dropship's engines. A hand grabbed her arm, pulling her up, and she looked up to see Keth's face, bruised but determined. He was shouting something, but she couldn't make out the words. All she knew was that they had to keep moving. Together, they staggered towards the dropship, the ground still shaking beneath them. The ship's ramp was open, a beacon of hope in the midst of the destruction, and they pushed themselves forward with the last of their strength. As they collapsed inside, the ramp closed behind them, and the ship lifted off, speeding away from the collapsing monolith. Valara lay on the floor, gasping for breath, her mind reeling from the events of the past few minutes. They had done it. They had destroyed the source of the infection. But at what cost? The ship's engines roared as they broke through the atmosphere, leaving the dying planet behind. Valara closed her eyes, exhaustion overwhelming her. The mission was over, but the memories of what they had seen, what they had done, would stay with her forever. Captain Thorne's voice came over the comms, calm and steady despite the chaos. "You did it. The signal's gone. The infection has been stopped." Valara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They had succeeded. The consortium was safe for now. But deep down, she knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, and their battle was far from over. But for now, they had earned their rest. The team had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. They had proven themselves as more than just soldiers. They were protectors, guardians of the galaxy, ready to stand against any threat that came their way. As the dropship sped towards the safety of the command ship, Valara allowed herself a moment of peace, a moment to reflect on all they had accomplished. They had come so far, faced so much, and they had done it together. And whatever the future held, she knew they would face it as a team, stronger and more united than ever before. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but they were ready for whatever came next.